All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. Thank you for joining this week's Tips and Tricks call. Today we have Ryan Burkhardt, who is the sales manager for the incident response team, here to talk to us about MDR opportunities and how that service can benefit your organization. So, as always, if you have any questions, please add those to the Q&A. We will go through those at the end of Ryan's discussion today, and anything that we cannot answer today, we'll be sure to follow up. So, Ryan, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. So what Alan and I are going to do here today, we're going to go through a little bit of a Q&A. Alan's going to be the customer. I'm going to be the Checkpoint employee, and we're going to talk about their environment and MDR. And then from there, we will go into a demo of MDR so everyone can see what that looks like. Try and answer as many questions. Usually try and throw in some proactive things that people think about as well. And Alan's got a list of questions that we're going to go through. So without further ado, Alan, if you want to unmute yourself, we will go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I do have a trouble sometimes with the mute button, but good thing not today. So welcome everybody. I will start off with a question that probably everybody has on its mind. What is Checkpoint MPR and how we differentiate ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So before we get started with that, would you mind telling me a little bit about your company and about your environment so I can have a little bit of feedback there?
Sure. We are a medium company doing capital management and have basically two locations here in New York City and one in London. We work and we need to have a constant connection between those two, and we need to have a 24 hours a day support for any type of an incident. So about 550 people, and I would wonder, what do you guys integrate with? I have in my environment about E5 license for O365. We utilize Palo Alto as firewalls on both locations. And we also have a CrowdStrike endpoint for our endpoint needs. But we really need some help because our IT team is rather small, and offloading some of it would be great. So what do you guys have to help us out with it?
Yeah, and so I heard, I think you have about 550 employees. I'll explain how the service works. Have you ever looked into, actually, let me ask you this. As far as your environment goes, do you have a big IT environment? Do you have an internal SOC, or is it something where you just have kind of a small IT department and not enough people to kind of look at all those alerts coming across?
Yeah, you know how it goes. There's money for everything but IT. So we are kind of small and looking for a good partner to help us out, do some managed services as far as dealing with all those incidents that might come up, or help us set up our environment in a way that would be most efficient.
Okay, perfect. Let me explain your first question to what is MPR, right? And I'll just, I'm only going to show a couple slides here just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we do. But Horizon MDR is basically a managed detection and response service. It's really a SOC as a service, if you will. The way we actually price this out is it's based on the number of users. It's an annual subscription service. The MPR, Managed Prevention Response, is really more of a Checkpoint acronym, primarily because Checkpoint is prevention oriented, right? So Checkpoint kind of adds that approach to that, where it's managed detection and prevention response. But essentially, this is a SOC as a service. Now, there are some advantages to the fact that it is a Checkpoint service. So for instance, I'll go through a couple of parallels here. We do include things like incident response. Checkpoint has had an incident response team in place for over a decade. Typically, we see between anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 incident engagements per year. And it is 24/7, 365 follow the sun model. We do include reactive incident response hours within the Horizon MDR service as well. So you get the full SOC service, which also includes reactive hours should anything shift over to an incident engagement. As far as the organization structure goes, you basically have two groups of analysts, 24/7, 365, follow the sun model. And that's for both incident response and MDR. And then there's also two different options that we provide. We provide basically a full MDR, and then we provide an MDR for EDR, which is basically endpoint only. And if we include full MDR, typically what that means is, having the analysts look at things like email, endpoint, network, right? So in a lot of cases, it's important to know, you mentioned you have CrowdStrike endpoint. Obviously, we'll be integrating that into it. It is a bring your own tech stack. It's been around for about 4 years at this point, which we'll dive into. But essentially, we would integrate the CrowdStrike endpoint, O365, a couple things there that we could integrate with. Obviously with O365, we do have native integration there. If you want to look at an additional email security, great thing about that is we integrate across the Checkpoint ecosystem. So all of the Checkpoint cybersecurity products that go into this, can be added as well. So we have something called Harmony Email and Collaboration, which would allow you to also add that security layer to the email and then integrate that into the MDR as well. And then from your, gateways, obviously with the firewalls being Palo Alto, we would integrate those as well. And then, the analyst would be seeing those alerts. Email and endpoint are really good around things like lateral movement. The network, as far as the firewalls go, sometimes can be high volume, but it's still kind of a core piece to integrate into the MDR service. Now, a couple of other things I'll just touch on here, right? Obviously, talk with a lot of customers. If they want to add additional things, and you'll see things like consulting, advanced services, which are more proactive incident response. Sometimes customers will add those on via a pro plan or specific hourly engagements. There are some other kind of ties in with the incident response side and MDR in the fact that Checkpoint Advantage, we utilize things like the Checkpoint Threat Cloud. We see all the threats that Checkpoint customers face. We have that intelligence at our disposal. Threat Cloud is basically an AI engine, over 2 billion decisions daily, more queries than Google, right? But that is specific to Checkpoint from a threat intelligence perspective. We also do intelligence sharing with Microsoft, Google, Facebook, local law enforcement. So we have third-party intelligence throughout, whether we're talking about incident response or managed detection and response. And then also in addition to that, we do have access to Checkpoint's research and development team. And from that standpoint, Checkpoint invests heavily on the R&D side. About 30% of our employees are there. So as kind of an elite group within Checkpoint, we have direct access to that. And if you've ever been to research.checkpoint.com, you'll see various articles posted for vulnerabilities, 0 days. And again, we can leverage that as well. So there is a big Checkpoint advantage from that perspective. When we talk about MDR, we started this about 4 years ago. The idea was we wanted to integrate across the Checkpoint ecosystem. Obviously, Checkpoint has all these cybersecurity products. From there, we wanted to start integrating into additional third parties, Microsoft being the biggest third party that's out there. So we did that. And then from there, we started integrating into additional third parties like Palo Alto for your firewalls, CrowdStrike on the endpoint. And then there are also additional options, and I'll just kind of, if it's of interest to you, we do have things like managed XDR with SIEM, a couple of different options there. That actually allows you to tie into an additional 138 products as well. Now, typically what we do is, we will do our integrations where we're basically ingesting security events from the security products, right? So provided that the API integration has already been done, which is typically how we'll do it, it's really a straightforward integration process. A lot of other providers out there we'll use, agents and other things, and sometimes it can be a little bit cumbersome to kind of deploy that. But because everything we do is API based, it's very straightforward from that perspective. And then of course, whatever we're integrating into the MDR service, we're doing monitor, investigate, hunt, and respond across all of those components. A lot of times what I see out there is sometimes people will do the monitoring, they'll do a tiered response, not so much the investigation or the hunting component of it, but we do all 4 of those components when we integrate into the MDR service. And this is a high level of overview of the architecture. Obviously, SOAR platform in the middle, it's custom built Tines and Torque framework. As noted, threat intelligence throughout with third parties, the Checkpoint Threat Cloud, and then integrations via API. When we talk about response, it is rapid response, full incident handling. Because it's a more proactive service, for instance, I'll just compare it. Our incident response customers do have a hotline that they call into. As MDR customers, they also have a hotline they can call into. Option 6 is for IR, option 7 is for MDR. You'll also have access to a portal, which I'm going to show you, to be able to interact directly with the MDR analyst. But because MDR is a 24/7, 365 preventative service, it is more, proactive in that basically, SLA practical times, our response time is less than 5 minutes, right? Versus, an incident response customer calling into a hotline, they have a 30-minute phone SLA. It is very, very quick from that perspective. Last thing I'm going to touch on here, obviously I mentioned lots of different things that we can integrate into. Microsoft typically is the biggest integration, right? Obviously from a perspective, and I'll touch a couple things here before going into the demo, but a couple of things I want to just touch on here. If you have E5, A5, G5 suite, and you have Plan 2, it gives you a lot of different options that you can integrate into directly with the MDR service. So again, that is a very easy kind of thing that we can do there. Now I'll go into some questions. If you have any questions, Alan,
Sure.
I'll go into that.
Well, it looks great. I didn't know you guys had that many integrations. Since I'm already Palo Alto customer, I did speak to them as well, and it seems like you guys are progressing nicely. However, there was a little bit of an issue of pricing, so I was wondering what is your pricing structure, and what kind of products do you have? You said the SOC as a service. That sounds very good to me, but is there anything else?
Yeah, so a lot of times, here's what I typically see customers do, and I'll show you the demo here after this as well. A lot of times what I see customers do is, because Checkpoint has all of these cybersecurity products that they can integrate into via API into the MDR service, a lot of times I see things like, CloudGuard SaaS that's integrated into it. The customer has, a cloud environment where they want to integrate that in, right? They get that extra layer of cloud security on top of that. They can integrate that into the MDR service, and the analyst is seeing that as well. Other things that I typically see integrated, right? A lot of times it is Harmony email and collaboration, which is again that email security layer added on top of just kind of the O365 piece, so the analysts can then see that. Harmony endpoint is another thing that can be integrated into it, in addition to third parties like CrowdStrike endpoint, which you have. So if you want to look at those components, obviously Checkpoint has a ton of options that you can then add into. And then two other things that I've seen. I have seen, managed XDR with SIEM, where we basically use Microsoft Sentinel. And again, that allows us to tie into an additional 138 products, right, that you may want to integrate into. The key thing I want to kind of relay here on that question is you definitely want to look at the integrations, right? Because when you look at the fact that, the analyst is looking at these alerts coming across, again, email and endpoint are really high value data points. And sometimes that's why I also see, customers that may have requirements around, hey, I want MDR for EDR, right? Most of the time it is full MDR, which makes sense. Because again, if you get that email endpoint and network, typically the firewall, again, you can kind of have that component come in there. Sometimes I see customers that add a SIM to that because it is a requirement that comes across. Other times I see them look at that and say, I just want a SOC service that covers, the core components that we need covered with the analyst actually looking at those alerts. And then, if you need to kind of have that SIM option, which can be very expensive, right, in terms of ingesting all of those data points, you can kind of view it as a hybrid SIM functionality, if you will, in addition, but there's lots of different options that you have. Did that answer your question?
Yes, but I do have a follow-up question for that. So with Sentinel, you get quite a few integrations with Microsoft. How about Defender for Identity Alerts or Azure ATP? Do we integrate with that, and can we take action on reports from them?
Yeah, so a couple different ways an integration like that can be done. I showed the slide with the E5, A5, G5 suite. Provided it's plan 2, because again, it's better data for the analyst coming across. And I'll give an example of that. For instance, we can integrate things like Cisco AMP, right? But a challenge with Cisco AMP, and so in some cases, it depends on the security product that you're integrating. But when we look at Cisco AMP, I'll pick on that specifically. A challenge with Cisco AMP is that it can only do scan only, right? So then you run into issues with isolating and things like that from an analyst perspective. Whereas a Harmony endpoint or a CrowdStrike endpoint tend to be more high-level cybersecurity products for the endpoint, right? So in some regard, it is dependent on kind of what you're integrating. From the Microsoft side of things, again, if you go with basically a managed XDR with SIM, you can integrate, those components of Microsoft that you referenced. If you're doing it directly with MDR, essentially, if it's the E5 suite, A5, G5, same version, right? And it's plan 2, you can integrate that as well. And then I think you also had a question around pricing that we can get into. It is user-based pricing, right? So it's an annual subscription model, depends on the number of users. Typically, we're talking about human users, so people with a pulse. But also, you may have a situation where maybe you have some servers and you have the endpoint security product, right? In this case, CrowdStrike endpoint with agents on those servers, right? So you can have some non-human users, but by and large, it is human users. It's an annual subscription service.
Sounds good. Can I see how that works?
Right. Yeah, let me take you through the demo, and then we'll save some time for a couple of questions here as well at the end, and just let me know if you have any questions as we go. So this is the demo. This is a portal that you would log into as an MDR customer. We start on the overview tab. We can adjust the time frame here, and essentially you'll see this data change. At the top, alerts, cases, important cases. If there's anything critical or incident related, this would show up here on the right-hand side. Underneath of that, different ways to break that data down. So alerts by product, case timeline, alert actions, case classification, case severity distribution. Throughout, also, you'll have access to support. So if you have any questions, you need to reach out to support. 2 different areas here. If you'll see the lifesaver, you can actually click on and get that information to be able to reach out directly to support. I'm going to show you a couple of other things in here as well. Under the operations tab, a couple things I want to point out. Pending approvals, right? Pending approval means we're waiting on a response from you. So if we need authorizations or approvals on your side, this is where that would show up. A typical example of that with customers is if they have, let's say, an executive's laptop and they want to give approval or authorization before we do anything. This is where that would show up. Obviously, from an automation perspective, during the onboarding, there's lots of different customizations that you can do, depending on how you want to work with the analyst, and we see a lot of different scenarios with customers there. Anything that's a recommendation, you will see show up here. A recommendation, for instance, to give an example we had with a customer, We had one customer where an analyst came across an automated PowerShell. It was showing up every day at noon. It was pulling data to this third-party provider. Customer had zero issues with it. The analyst did because personal identifiable information was potentially exposed in this case. So even though the vendor was known, the analyst basically had a recommendation here for a policy change. So anything that is not critical will typically show up here. A request, and this is where you can interact directly with the analyst. A request is basically, anything that comes from the customer. So block a URL, scan a file, look at an email, a threat intelligence query, really anything that it's a way for the customer to start the thread instead of the analyst starting the thread. And then we're tying full playbooks to any of those requests as well. Also, notifications. If there's a new feature, a new product that's being added, you will see a notification show up here. Under cases, and this is where I'll spend the majority of time, but you'll see cases broken down based on severity on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you will see a full description. So what it is, where it is, when it happened, who it happened to, how it was detected. You'll see the assets analysis, the hosts, the users. You'll also see the indicator analysis, so everything from deployments, file hashes, file names, processes. If there's a recommendation in here, you will see that as well. If you need to upload or download files, you can do that directly from the portal between you and the analyst. If you have a question on this particular case directly for the analyst, you can ask it right here in the chat. And then, of course, under alerts, if you want to go and you want to pull the raw data, you can pull the raw data information here. Again, typically with MDR, it's API integrations. We're ingesting security events from those security products. But also, when we talk about cases, a case could be assigned to a customer. It could be shared responsibility. There might be multiple points where the customer or the analyst actually drive the case. And then you'll see things like entities highlights, which is a highlight of the event. It's key metrics we're searching on, looking for, understanding, is this hostile or not? Is any action needed? And then we provide additional information and visualizations around the alerting, the triggers, the enrichments of the event. And then also you'll have access to automated reports as well right here. Threat extraction, forensics reports, available to interact with everything from enriched data, summary data. And it's a very fluid and dynamic process. And then we're adding more and more capabilities. So we're looking at things like phishing, prevention capabilities across all these products. And then we provide data on whether we've actually seen this event before, context around aggregating events into a single case. So to give an example, if there was a scenario where you had antibot on the gateway, antibot on the endpoint, and then there's a phishing email, and all these things could be related, they're then all aggregated into a single case together. And the system is doing it automatically by taking these individual alerts that have occurred on each product and aggregating them all into a single case together. So if you had 500 to 600 antibot alerts generated every day, you're using the MDR service, you can ignore those, use the MDR service. We also have a false positive reduction engine, which sits in front of the SOAR to deal with things like alert reduction, in particular around false positives, but also things like information alerts and threat extraction. So if an alert shows up, 500 meg file, exceeds size, it's then run through a playbook. Also, when we talk about cases, there could be a couple of elements to a case. A case could have multiple events. The system automatically aggregates similar events, not just by product and type, but also multiple correlation components. So if we have logs from 6 different products, the system is smart enough to put them all together into a single case. And we've seen some cases where hundreds of events were aggregated into a single case together, meaning a significant amount of data reduction on your side. You'll also see annotations on what we've detected. So antibot, endpoint, for example, the ID, the name of the company, the time, what stage the event is in. Also tags from the checkpoint incident response team for threat intelligence and data enrichment. If you want to add your own tags, you can do that as well. You'll also see what tier it's assigned to. So tier 1 general SOC, tier 2 threat hunter. And if you need to escalate to a manager, you can do that as well. When we talk about tiers, customer and the analyst can change tiers, so promote or demote depending on changes in the life cycle. Also, any analyst can pick up where a previous analyst left off. So if it's 2 in the morning and we have an analyst in Australia looking at the alerts. They have a customer reference system being able to see how to contact you, what your network blocks are, your whitelists, what your infrastructure looks like, and the data set will grow after onboarding as we work cases together. So instead of just throwing alerts over to you, we actually enrich after every single case with our knowledge about you, which could be an individual, a user, a net block, anything, and it's capturing more and more data about you to refine the service over time for faster response and more automations. Lastly, whoever's going to be working directly with the analyst will have their own user profile set up. And again, lots of different ways to interact with the analyst here. But essentially, that is the overview of the demo. Now, Alan, let's cut to questions. I know we got about 3 minutes, and I think I see a couple questions in there.
Hey,
First, here we go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we just need some clarification. If an existing, as an existing MDR customer, love to see the Defender for Identity Alerts, formerly known as Azure ATP. Will it be considered for action by the MDR team?
Yeah, if we're integrating via API, it is done via the E5, A5, G5 suite, provided that it's Plan 2. And one of the things I was kind of highlighting there, right, is if you have, let's say, A3, G3, E3, right, it's not as substantive in terms of what the analyst sees, right? So you really need to have that 5 suite with the Plan 2.
Okay. And then another question is, what is a safe way to test MDR response system? I'd like to see how it works before an awful day comes when it's needed for real. Yeah.
We make it easier for customers to actually do POCs of this, right? So you can do a proof of concept because we're doing it via API. If there are, and again, what I would say is during a POC, you probably want to limit it to, a few different integrations via API that can be done, quickly. API keys, very quick integration because it's already set up with the development, right? Very quick for us to do those POCs, right? Whereas other providers, something I mentioned at the beginning, might have difficulty because they have to deploy agents, things like that. So sometimes they can't do POCs, but you could actually do a POC with us because it's API integrations. Again, we're ingesting those security events from the security products. And it's a lot easier for us to do it. The onboarding process is very, very quick. And typically POCs are about 30 days.
Okay, terrific. That answers all the questions, and I know we're butting up against time. So any last comments before we close things out, Ryan?
No, I mean, I would say this, right? Obviously I deal with a lot of customers on the East Coast, the South, as far as the US goes. There are other counterparts for me that work with, other regions of the US, but, definitely, reach out if there's any questions on the service. I think it's always good to kind of get a feel for what customers want to do, because I've seen lots of different scenarios, and sometimes, a customer has gaps that they're looking to fill in. Maybe they are doing some things, but they find that it's not enough. Other times, in a lot of cases, they just don't have the IT staff and they need a SOC service.
And as always, I'll just, as a reminder for everybody on the call, please engage your account teams. They are there to help and assist, and we'll help coordinate a conversation with Ryan and any of the folks on the MDR team. Terrific. Thank you for the time today, Ryan and Alan. And this recording will be posted very soon. So if you do want to revisit the recording, please make sure you jump to our session on the Checkmates channel, and then it will take you to the YouTube video. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, team.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.